Today is going to be truly harrowing. For the first time on this channel, I feel the need to issue a warning. If you are sensitive to tragedies or react strongly to them, it might be better to skip this video. For everyone else who has decided to stay, welcome back to the channel where I talk about real crimes and strange phenomena. The Japanese have long been famous for their extreme dedication to work. The term karoshi was introduced in Japan in the 70s to describe deaths caused by exhaustion from overworking. You've likely heard of it. Managers force employees to perform tasks far beyond their responsibilities and encourage them to arrive early, while leaving on time is stigmatized. When deadlines are tight, sleeping at the workplace is a common practice. Despite the negative impact on society and the collective mental health of the Japanese workforce, this unhealthy tradition persists to this day. They say that a bad experience is still an experience because you analyze your mistakes and move forward, keeping those lessons in mind. But some mistakes are so catastrophic that all you can do is watch in horror as everything slowly falls apart. In 1999, a combination of negligence, corporate greed, and a total disregard for worker safety led to the unimaginable suffering of one man. On the morning of September 30th, 1999, nuclear plant technician Hisashi Ouchi, his colleague Masato Shinohara, and their supervisor Yutaka Yokokawa arrived at the Tokaimura Nuclear Power Plant. It was just another workday for them. Now, I'm not a chemist or a physicist, but I'll explain this as I understand it. One of the facilities at this plant was used for processing uranium, which would later be turned into fuel rods for other nuclear stations and reactors. There was no specially trained personnel for this specific role, so it was performed by whichever technicians happened to be free at the moment. The procedure was strictly documented: which tank to pour into, what to mix, and for how long. However, 3 years prior, the company had changed the official procedure so that the uranyl nitrate solution could be prepared manually in stainless steel buckets, rather than using a special dissolution tank as required before. This was, to put it mildly, illegal and against government regulations, but it had never led to an accident because the uranium concentration had always been kept extremely low. When the 3 workers arrived that day, the plant was already 2 days behind schedule for delivering the nuclear fuel rods. The company was putting pressure on the employees to finish the procedure as quickly as possible. Because of this, the technicians modified the procedure even further. They were now mixing the uranium solution in buckets and pouring it manually directly into the precipitation tank. Furthermore, they used a uranium concentration 7 times higher than what was allowed, all to create the fuel as fast as possible. As you can imagine, this led to tragic consequences. At approximately 10:35 a.m., Ouchi and Shinohara were mixing the uranium powder in buckets using that massive overconcentration. Ouchi leaned over the precipitation tank to help Shinohara, who was standing on a platform pouring the mixture in. Suddenly, the gamma radiation alarm went off. Ouchi, Shinohara, and Yokokawa realized they had made a terrible mistake. According to reports, all 3 saw a flash of blue light. This is known as the Vavilov-Cherenkov effect. It releases a massive amount of energy and creates a shockwave similar to the sonic boom of a supersonic jet or a bullet. This confirmed that an uncontrolled nuclear fission chain reaction had occurred and the room was flooded with radiation. Ouchi, who was closest to the explosion, received the highest dose of radiation. Shinohara, standing nearby, received slightly less. Yokokawa was sitting at a desk several meters away and received the smallest dose. To give you some perspective, the internationally recognized limit for radiation safety for one person per year is 20 millisieverts. A dose considered lethal is 5,000 millisieverts. Ouchi received 17,000 millisieverts in an instant, over 3 times the lethal dose. Shinohara received 10,000, and Yokokawa received 3,000. The 3 men immediately tried to run, but they didn't get far. Ouchi and Shinohara immediately felt burning pain across their bodies, began to feel nauseous, and struggled to breathe. Yokokawa also felt the effects, though not as severely. Ouchi made it to a locker room where he vomited and collapsed on the floor. The plant was immediately evacuated. Ouchi, Shinohara, and Yokokawa were taken to the National Institute of Radiological Sciences in Chiba. However, due to the severity of Ouchi's condition, he was quickly moved to the University of Tokyo Hospital, which had more qualified staff and advanced equipment. On the evening of September 30th, Ouchi arrived at the hospital on a stretcher and was taken to an intensive care unit. A nurse noted that aside from a swollen hand and skin that looked slightly sunburned, the man looked fine. He was alert, talkative, and friendly. One nurse even commented that she thought he could have gone home that same day. Unknowingly, they were witnessing the beginning of one of the most horrific deaths in history. After learning Ouchi had been in a nuclear accident, doctors studied his bone marrow to identify the problem, and what they found horrified them. The doctors realized Ouchi's case was anything but ordinary. The human body has countless cells that die but are replaced over time. This is facilitated by our chromosomes, which hold the blueprint for the repair process. If chromosomes don't function, a person simply cannot survive. Ouchi's chromosomes were so badly damaged by the radiation blast that his samples looked like soup. Some had shattered into pieces like glass and were scattered, making them impossible to identify. Some were abnormally fused together. The blueprints for cell replication and repair were simply gone. The chromosomes were useless. The doctors couldn't believe what they were seeing. If the damage was this severe, why did Ouchi look healthy and remain in such a good mood? The doctors concluded the man was in the ghost phase. This is a period of apparent health that can last a few hours or days depending on the body's reaction to radiation. Before the blast, Hisashi's cells were still functional, so the health he displayed upon arrival was a fleeting illusion. Once the radiation poisoning truly took hold, everything would change. Simply put, he was a ticking time bomb, and his nightmare was about to begin. Beyond the loss of chromosomal function, his white blood cell count dropped to dangerous levels, making him extremely vulnerable to infections. To combat this, the lead doctor, Kazuhiko Meikawa, ordered Ouchi to be moved to a sterile room. Dr. Meikawa realized that to give him any chance of survival, they had to provide his body with healthy chromosomes to jumpstart cell production. He decided to try an experimental cancer treatment called a hematopoietic stem cell transplant. This involved taking healthy bone marrow cells from a donor and transplanting them into Ouchi. Ideally, these healthy cells would migrate to his bone marrow and allow him to produce his own healthy cells again. The only catch was that the donor had to be an immunological match. Fortunately, Hisashi's sister was a match, and the procedure was performed. The family was worried, knowing Ouchi was the first patient in the world to receive such treatment for radiation damage. Dr. Meikawa made sure the family could see him daily. He knew that false hope would only make the situation worse, so he wanted them to see the changes and prepare for the worst. Meanwhile, the man himself didn't seem to grasp the gravity of his situation. A nurse noted that he once asked, "I thought I could leave the hospital in about a month, but it will take longer, won't it?" Later, he asked about his exposure. "When you are exposed like this, is there a risk of getting leukemia or something?" Ouchi didn't know he simply wouldn't have enough time for leukemia to even develop. Over time, the physical symptoms of radiation poisoning surfaced. Having lost its elasticity, Ouchi's skin began to slough off. Medics noticed that when they removed medical tape from his body, large chunks of skin came with it, so they stopped using it entirely. Later, his lungs began to fill with fluid, and he struggled to breathe. At this point, it was hard for him to move or even speak, yet his spirit seemed unbreakable. He still smiled and told his wife, "I love you," which the nurses found incredibly moving. Eventually, as fluid accumulated constantly in his lungs, Ouchi lost the ability to breathe on his own. Doctors placed him on a ventilator. An endoscopy revealed that his intestinal membrane had died and was peeling away. This lining is vital for absorbing nutrients, water, and protecting against infections. Without it, a person cannot hold on to nutrients or water, leading to dehydration and starvation. But as it turned out, death would have been preferable to what Ouchi was about to endure. To find out what went wrong, Dr. Meikawa ran another test. He discovered that the healthy chromosomes they had transplanted were now corrupted by the residual radiation in his body. Despite their efforts, his body was too damaged, and the radiation blast had affected even the healthy transplanted cells. Ouchi was back to square one. Meanwhile, Ouchi developed severe gastrointestinal issues. He lost control of his bowels and had constant diarrhea. The peeling intestinal membrane caused internal bleeding, and he was losing blood so fast that Dr. Meikawa had to perform transfusions, sometimes up to 10 times a day. He was kept on constant fentanyl to manage the pain, but his skin and flesh continued to blister and fall off. His body could no longer hold fluids. Reports state he was losing 8 to 10 liters of fluid a day, which had to be replaced via IV. To try and save what was left of his skin, staff wrapped almost his entire body in medical gauze, hoping it would hold the skin in place and retain moisture. It didn't help. The bandages would be soaked through with blood within hours. At that point, Ouchi was beyond despair. A nurse recorded his words. "No more. I'm going home. Please stop." In a delirious state, he reportedly called out for his mother. Because his skin had lost all elasticity, his eyelids could no longer close, and it was reported that he cried blood. To help him sleep and ease the agony, he was given massive doses of sedatives. Dr. Mikawa spoke with the family, telling them his condition was unlikely to improve. The family begged him to do everything possible, so the only thing left to try was a massive transplant of lab-grown skin. Mikawa hoped that if the skin took, it would hold in fluids and buy time to find other solutions. Unfortunately, because of the massive amount of fluid leaking through his body, the skin didn't take and quickly fell off. It had been 2 months since Ouchi was admitted. He had undergone countless transfusions, skin grafts, and stem cell transplants. He was on a ventilator. His skin had rotted away. His eyes couldn't close even in sleep because he had no eyelids. His intestines were bleeding out, and he was in constant burning pain. But he was alive. The massive blood loss and constant transfusions had a secondary effect. Ouchi's heart was beating at over 120 beats per minute, as if he were running a marathon. The strain was catastrophic, and then his heart stopped. The medics did not have a do not resuscitate order, so they were legally obligated to do everything to bring him back. They performed chest compressions, and his heart started again, only to stop shortly after. The team administered cardiotonic drugs, and after the heart stopped and was restarted 3 times, it returned to a steady but very fast rhythm. However, these cardiac arrests severely impacted his brain and kidney function. His overall organ function began to fail. When his family visited, he didn't even recognize them. By that point, his survival was entirely dependent on machines. Ouchi's immune cells became abnormal and began attacking his remaining healthy white blood cells. On the 81st night, Dr. Mikawa gathered the family and told them Hisashi Ouchi could not be saved, and if his heart stopped again, he should not be resuscitated. The family agreed and signed the DNR order. And so, on the 83rd day of this nightmare, Hisashi Ouchi's heart stopped for the final time. It is difficult to understand who exactly is to blame. Of course, the primary fault lies with the plant. But should we blame the doctors who used every means to try to save him? Or the family who clung to every hope of his recovery? I don't know. I only know that no one deserves such a fate. The more people know about this, the less likely something similar will happen in the future. Share your thoughts in the comments.